We take a look at which players the LA Kings have signed and who they let walk away this offseason in relation to the Ontario Reigns roster and see what that's going to look like this year. Plus, which LA Kings prospects could be making the jump from the AHL to the NHL sooner rather than later. That coming up on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. And it seems like just a couple of weeks ago that I was asking if we could get up to 500 subscribers. Well, we're now at 542 and climbing. And let's see if we can get to 600 by the end of this month. Again, my name is Eddie Garcia. I am your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. For the past 20 plus years, I've been at the Fox Sports Radio Network, where I'm a co-host, sidekick reporter, NHL insider, and also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for the past 30 years. We are 9 days away from the 2022 Rookie Face-Off in San Jose, with Kings prospects taking part in a 3-day event against players from the Sharks, Ducks, Avalanche, Golden Knights, and Coyotes. The Kings will be playing their first game September 16th against the Avalanche rookies. They'll then play against the Golden Knights rookies on Saturday and then close it out on Sunday against the rookies from the San Jose Sharks. We'll be giving you any news that comes from that event. Training camp opens in 14 days. It comes up on September the 21st. We're 21 days away from the Kings preseason opener against the Sharks. That's September 28th. And we are 34 days away from the LA Kings season opener, October 11th, against the Vegas Golden Knights. It'll be here sooner rather than later, and we cannot wait. Now, on Friday, we had our Friday feedback feature where we read and answered listener emails, and I saved one for today, and it comes from Mike in Camarillo. And his email said, can you give us a peek into what the roster is going to look like for the Ontario Reign? I'd like to know who the forwards are, the defensemen, the goalies, and the running to make the team, who might get the C with Brent Sutter's departure. Any idea about assistant captains? Granted, what happens at Kings training camp will have an effect on the Reign roster, but as best you can, give us an update, and that would be great. He says, Martin Chromiak is one of my favorites, and I'd like to see what other recent prospects might be playing their first full seasons with the Reign. Mike, thank you for the email and the suggestion. So that is exactly what we're going to do on this week's show, or today's show, I should say. We are going to look at the LA Kings and the Ontario Reign, their AHL affiliate, for this offseason, see what moves they made, and give our best guess as to what the roster is going to look like for this season, especially as it relates to players that you need to keep an eye on and look for in the stats and whatnot to see how they're doing, because these are players that will likely be playing for the LA Kings in the near future. Maybe not this season, depending on what happens this season with injuries and things like that, but players that we should be seeing in Kings uniforms in the very near future. Also wanted to mention that I have reached out to Ontario Reign play-by-play man Josh Schaefer to have him on as a guest and talk about the Ontario Reign, and he is scheduled to join us next week. So we look forward to that as well. So a little more talk about the Ontario Reign before we get the NHL season going and they get their AHL season going. So real quick, we're going to look at what moves were made pertaining to the Ontario Reign this offseason. And Mike mentioned it a moment ago, but veteran Brett Sutter, who played parts of 7 seasons with the Reign and was captain for 5 of those seasons, has moved on. He signed a 1-year deal with the Calgary Flames organization. Yes, he is rejoining his father, Daryl, who, of course, we know very well, the head coach of the 2 Stanley Cup winning teams for the LA Kings, now the head coach of the Calgary Flames, and his son, Brett, likely closing out his career in the, I believe, the organization that originally drafted him, and with his father as well. Although I don't think Brett will be playing for the Calgary Flames. More likely he'll assume the same role he had with the Ontario Reign, being a veteran presence for their AHL affiliate. I think it's in Abbotsford, but I'm not positive about that because things change. But Brett Sutter played 65 games for the Ontario Reign last year. And again, he was a veteran presence, the captain of the team for 5 seasons. So the Ontario Reign will be missing his leadership. Another player they're going to be missing as far as leadership and production was veteran forward Martin Ferk, who Kings fans are most likely familiar with. He scored 40 goals last season for the Ontario Reign. I believe that was second in the entire AHL. He left to sign a 1-year deal with the St. Louis Blues organization. Ferk played 58 games for the Reign last season. So a couple of veteran players that the Reign will need to replace. Sutter's 35, Ferk is 28, and not in the plans for the LA Kings, but important players for the Ontario Reign. We also had forward Vladimir Trichiev. He left to sign a 1-year deal back in his native Russia in the KHL, played 41 games with the Reign last season, 4 with the Kings, 26 years old. Also forward Johan Sodogrin was not tendered a qualifying offer, played 48 games with the Reign over the past 2 seasons, just 7 though last season. So those are the forwards that are no longer with the Ontario Reign. On defense, veteran defenseman Christian Wolanin left to sign with the Canucks. 27-year-old played 37 games with the Reign last season, 11 with the Kings over the past 2 seasons. Also, defenseman Austin Strand, who's a player that if you're a Kings fan, you're probably familiar with. He kind of flirted with the Kings a bit as far as being a prospect to keep an eye on, but he signed with the Ducks organization. 25-year-old played 21 games with the Kings over the last 2 seasons, 92 games for the Reign over the past 3 seasons. Also on defense, Nelson Nogier played 13 games for the Reign last season. He was acquired in a trade from Winnipeg. 26-year-old left as an unrestricted free agent. And as far as the goaltending position, veteran Garrett Sparks, who played 12 games for the Reign in last season, 29-year-old, 2 games with the Kings as well. He left as an unrestricted free agent. So those are some of the names that left the Ontario Reign from this offseason. As far as players that the Kings/Reign have signed for this offseason, we'll start with forward TJ Tynan. He is re-signed on a 2-year deal worth $1.575 million. He played 62 games for the Reign last season, led him in points with 98, and I believe he was also second in the entire NHL in points. Played 2 games with the Kings last season. He's 30 years old. This is going to be his 10th season playing at the AHL level. He's a guy who, again, kind of replaces Brent Sutter or maybe takes over more of the role of the leadership. And Mike had asked who would be the captain for the Ontario Reign this coming season. I'd be willing to bet that TJ Tynan will be the new captain for the Ontario Reign. And again, you might be thinking, well, this guy had 98 points in the AHL. Why isn't he getting a sniff with the LA Kings? Again, he's 30 years old. They kind of know what he is. He's a very good AHL player, but not really an NHL prospect of any note. So he knows this as well. His role is to continue to play professional hockey and get paid to do that, and be a veteran presence and leader at the AHL level. If he could come up to play for the Kings for a few games here and there as a fill-in, but for the most part, TJ Tynan is what he is. He's an NHL player, or excuse me, he's an AHL player. He's going to be with the Ontario Reign, and like I said, I think TJ Tynan will be the captain of the Ontario Reign next season. At least that's my prediction. Also, the Kings signed forward Andre Lee to a 1-year deal. He played 11 games with Ontario last season after a 4-year career in college at UMass Lowell. He was a 7th-round pick of the Kings in 2019. The Reign also signed veteran forward Alan Quine. He's 29 years old. He's played over 100 NHL games, but mostly been an AHL veteran. They also re-signed forward Jacob Doty to a 1-year deal. He's 29, played 41 games with Ontario last year. He's also a career minor leaguer. As far as defensemen, the Kings signed defenseman Jacob Overari to a 2-year, $1.525 million contract. We'll have more on him coming up in a moment. Defenseman Toby Paquette-Bisson signs a 1-year, 2-way contract. He's 25. This will be his first year with the Ontario Reign. He's played 132 career ECHL games and 84 career AHL games. The Reign also re-signed 32-year-old defenseman Cameron Gauntz to a 1-year contract. He is also a candidate to be captain. I would think he's a veteran of 731 career AHL games. This will be his 13th AHL season. If he's not wearing the C on his sweater, I would expect to see him wearing an A as one of the alternate captains. So another veteran presence, a guy who, again, is not going to be at the NHL level. He is a AHL player, continuing to play professional hockey and get paid for it, but he knows what he is as well. He's a player that's going to be one of the veteran leaders in the AHL, but not expected to be playing in the NHL, certainly 32 years of age as well. We also had 24-year-old defenseman Frederick Lair sign a one-year deal. He played 15 games with the Reign last season after coming over in a trade from the Milwaukee Admirals, which is the Nashville Predators AHL affiliate. The Reign also signed defenseman Christian Kasaskatool. He's 25 years old, 25 games with Ontario last season, and Tyler Emamoto, another defenseman. He's 23, had a 5-year career at the University of Wisconsin, played 2 games with Ontario last season. And as far as the goaltending position, goalie Matt Volata signed a 1-year contract with the Kings worth just over $780,000. He started 46 games for the Reign as their number one goaltender last season. And goaltender Phoenix Copley signs a 1-year, $825,000 contract. He'll be 30 years old. Actually, he is 30 years old. He's played 8 AHL seasons. He's had 31 career NHL games, mostly with the Washington Capitals. But Phoenix Copley, just kind of that veteran stopgap, should the Kings need someone to come up and fill in for either Jonathan Quick or Cal Peterson. If there's like an illness or something really minor where they are not available for 3, 4, 5 games, but it's not something that they need to put them on, injured reserve for, you'd call up a veteran guy like Phoenix Copley to be the backup to either Quick or Peterson. We're going to talk more about the players who are going to be on the Reign who could see time in LA at some point this season or in the near future. But first, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There is a new flavor, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. And Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to the new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture. They have real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. What's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKEDON15. All right, so most of the players that we have mentioned are not likely going to see time in the NHL with the LA Kings anytime soon, or at least not any significant time. Maybe a couple of exceptions would be a guy like Jacob Overari. But who are the players that will be playing for the Reign that you need to keep an eye out for when you look at the box score, when you go to OntarioReign.com and you click on the stats? Who are the names you're going to want to see how they're playing this upcoming season? All right, well, here is a list of the forwards to keep an eye on, and you likely know these names. But again, these are the players that we need to keep an eye on for the near future for the LA Kings that should be playing with the Ontario Reign. Let's start with Rasmus Coupar, and you might be saying, well, wait a minute, why is Rasmus Coupar playing in the AHL and not the NHL? He's 22 years old. He's entering his 4th professional season, 57 games with the LA Kings. But he is waiver eligible, meaning that the LA Kings can send him down to the AHL and he would not be exposed to waivers where other teams could claim him. That is not the case for guys like Gabe Vilardi, Jarrett Anderson-Dolan. So that makes Rasmus Coupar a more likely candidate to start the season in the AHL. They could call him up eventually, but I think because of that, we're going to see Rasmus Coupar, who is certainly a fringe NHL player, somebody who likely will be at the NHL level sooner rather than later. I think he's going to start in Ontario with the Reign. Also, Samuel Fagamo, 22 years old. He's entering his 3rd season with the Reign, 63 games last season in Ontario, had a fine season with 27 goals and 44 points. Alex Turcott, of course, is a name we're all pretty familiar with, former first-round pick of the Kings. He's 21 years old, entering his 3rd season with the Reign. 59 games over the last 2 seasons with Ontario, but he has been hampered by injuries. In particular, last year, the 2 concussions. I don't know that anyone knows what his status is at the moment as far as, is he going to be a participant in training camp? He failed his physical for the development camp and was not a part of that. So we'll have to wait and see if he's improved, and we'll be ready to go for training camp and then eventually, hopefully, playing in games sooner rather than later. But he's a guy that you circle Just hoping that he's in the lineup first and foremost, and then to see how he's going to do, because he's a big time prospect for the Kings, but just needs to stay healthy. Tyler Madden is another player we need to keep an eye on. 22 years old. He's entering his third season with the Reign. 48 games with Ontario last season. He had 14 goals and 31 points. Keel Thomas is 22, entering his third season with the Reign. 40 games over the last 2 years with Ontario. He's got 19 goals and 39 points over the past 2 seasons. Martin Chromiak is certainly a guy that we had mentioned from the email. And he's a guy that is going to be making his Ontario Reign debut this season. He's 20 years old. He did play 2 games for the Reign last year, so I guess debut is not an accurate term. But he played the bulk of his season a year ago in the OHL, where he played 60 games. He had 44 goals and 42 points in the OHL, had a breakout season, opened a lot of eyes, and a lot of people are circling Martin Chromiak to see how he does in a full season in Ontario. And there are high expectations for him. That's a player we definitely want to keep an eye on. Also, a couple of guys who you may have watched in the recent World Junior Championships for Finland. Casper Simontival, he's 20 years old. He's yet to make his North American pro debut. Did have a standout performance, though, as one of the better players for Finland at the World Junior Championships recently. And also his teammate Samuel Helenius is 19. He did play 12 games in the Reign last season, making his professional debut coming over from Finland. So those are the forwards that we're going to need to keep an eye on that are likely going to start the season with the Ontario Reign. Rasmus Coupar, Samuel Fagamo, Alex Turcott, Tyler Madden, Keel Thomas, Martin Chromiak, Casper Simontival, and Samuel Helenius. As far as the defensemen, obviously Jordan Spence saw time with the Kings last year, just 21 years old, and he's entering just his second pro season. So in his first season of professional hockey, 46 games with Ontario, 24 games with the LA Kings. This is a guy who has shown rapid improvement and a great job of quickly developing and making himself someone who is adapted quickly to the pro game. Jordan Spence is a guy who's going to be at the NHL level sooner rather than later. Maybe not this year, but I would expect next season. Jacob Overari is another player we mentioned briefly earlier. He's 24 years old. He's entering his third pro season, 56 games over the last 2 years with Ontario, 19 games with the Kings last season. He's not a spectacular player, but a good stopgap player if the Kings need some depth on defense. If there's any injuries, I think they feel very comfortable calling up guys like Jordan Spence and Jacob Overari. Overari, not as big of a prospect as Spence, and the same goes for Helga Grants. He is 20 years old, entering his second pro season, 56 games with Ontario last year. He's another guy who I think is the future on defense for the LA Kings. He played in the World Junior Championships for Sweden this past month as well. As far as the goaltenders, mentioned Matt Volata earlier. He's 23 years old. He's entering his fourth pro season and his fourth with Ontario. 46 games last year. With the Reign, he had a 2.99 goals against average and a 903 save percentage. I expect him to be the number one goalie again for Ontario. And I also mentioned Phoenix Copley. He's 30 years old, 35 games in the AHL last season with Hershey. That's the AHL affiliate of the Washington Capitals. Also played 2 games for the Capitals last season. We've talked about the goaltending a little bit here on Locked On LA Kings. If there is an injury, a significant injury to either Cal Peterson or Jonathan Quick, then obviously the other is going to get the full-time job. That's not the issue, but who would the backup be? Would it be Phoenix Copley? I think that's likely. I don't see the Kings elevating Matt Volata to be a backup number 2 goalie at the NHL level in the event there is a significant injury to either Quick or Peterson. I think they still want him to develop and see a lot of time in net. And so why would you take that time away from him just to sit on the bench and wear a baseball cap, where Phoenix Copley has had that role before? Again, he knows what he is. He's just looking to hang on and be a professional goaltender. I mean, look, maybe a Jack Campbell situation could happen with somebody like a Phoenix Copley, but it's unlikely. But he would be, I'm sure, the backup goaltender for the LA Kings if something happens significant to Quick or Peterson. And if something significant happens to both of them, the Kings will go out and find another goalie. I don't believe they would turn things over. A team that is obviously has high aspirations this year, being a playoff team, they're not going to just turn the net over to Matt Volata and say, good luck, kid, or Phoenix Copley. They will go out and get somebody else in a worst case scenario, which we obviously keep our fingers crossed that is not going to be the case. We will talk about a couple of players that you're probably familiar with that I did not mention in a moment. But first, a reminder that the Locked On NHL podcast has you covered for all your league-wide NHL talk with a rotating cast of local hosts from the Locked On NHL channels, breaking down the biggest stories in hockey 5 days a week. Subscribe for free on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. So what about Brant Clark? What about Francesco Pinelli? A couple of names that you might be familiar with, especially Brant Clark. Why did I not mention them as far as players to watch for the Ontario Reign in the AHL this season? Well, that's because they can't play for the Ontario Reign. Both Clark and Pinelli are 19 years old, and there is an AHL 20-year-old player rule, which states the NHL and the CHL, the Canadian Hockey League, have an agreement that a signed player age 18 or 19 who is claimed from the CHL, Clark played for the Barrie Colts in the Ontario Hockey League and Pinelli with the Kitchener Rangers in the OHL. Those players must be reassigned to their CHL junior club, whom they last played for, if they do not make an NHL roster. This age rule only applies to players who are from the CHL. It does not apply to college university players. It does not apply to players from Europe. That's why we can see a guy like Helga Grants play for the Ontario Reign, and Martin Chromiak, guys like that, because they're of a certain age. But again, if you're 18 or 19 and you sign a professional contract and you come from the CHL, which the OHL is a part of, you have to either make the NHL club or you have to be returned to your junior team. So that's the situation for Brant Clark. That's the situation for Francesco Pinelli. Pinelli is going to go back to the Kitchener Rangers. He is not going to be an LA King this year, but he's a guy to keep an eye on, certainly in the near future. For Brant Clark, we've talked about it before. There is a lot of chatter that he could make the LA Kings roster this season. If he doesn't, then obviously he will have to return to the OHL. He cannot play in Ontario with the Reign, unfortunately, because of his age. I'm sure the Kings would love to have him in the AHL to play against grown men and higher level of competition. But we shall see. That's one of the things we're going to be keeping an eye on in training camp to see how well he plays. And again, there is a 9-game window that the Kings can see him play at the NHL level to see how he handles it and then make a decision as well. So Brant Clark will not be a member of the Ontario Reign coming up this season. He'll either be back with his junior team, the Barrie Colts, or he will be in the NHL with the LA Kings. Hey, thanks to listener Mike for the suggestion on this topic. I hope it informed you a little bit. Again, these are players that you probably have heard of. But again, we're focused here on Locked On LA Kings, on the Kings. But this is the future of the LA Kings sooner rather than later. And so we are going to keep an eye out as well. On the Ontario Reign this season, we will have a weekly Reign report on Locked On LA Kings, just to give you a quick snapshot of how the team is doing and who are the players, specifically the guys that we named, to keep an eye on and how they're doing as the season goes along. So again, thanks to listener Mike for the suggestion, and we look forward to talking with Ontario Reign play-by-play broadcaster Josh Schaefer next week to get a little bit more insight on the Ontario Reign as well. If you would like to send an email like Mike did with a suggestion for a topic for a future Locked On LA Kings episode, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. If you want to keep up to date on what's going on with this show and what's going on with the LA Kings, we would invite you to follow us on Twitter. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I am Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and for watching Locked On LA Kings. As we always close out the show and remind you, go Kings go.